Oh, the deep or dive is back. I hope everybody had a phenomenal Christmas. I had a good Christmas until Brett Brown ruined it, Adam. It's Adam Shaw right there. I'm Dave Lochran. Talked about it a bit on the early bird, so I won't bore you. But that son of a bitch not calling a timeout on the final possession of the game. My Christmas could have been great. It could have been a phenomenal holiday. Everything could have been spectacular. But it went from great to just mediocre. Although the Dow did have its biggest single day point gain in history. So that's kind of cool coming off a terrible Christmas Eve. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. I cashed I profited in a Yahoo overlay tournament for the first time
Nice.
yesterday.
Look at
So
that.
I don't feel like I need to totally quit DFS anymore.
Major profit?
No, just more than $0.
It's not a loss.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Anyway, we're happy to have you guys. I hope you had a great Christmas. For those of you that celebrate it, other holidays, for those of you that don't, um, we've got a good show ahead of us. We've got 10 games here on Wednesday. You know what really sucks, though, Adam? For one reason or another, one of them being a pretty wicked Christmas Day hangover that resulted in more bathroom time than one would prefer. I didn't. Oh, and and me not having time to research, I didn't get to, for the first time since DFS has been around, I didn't get to play on Christmas Day. I played the showdown slate, but I didn't get to play Christmas Day basketball. Really disappointing.
Yeah, that sucks. It's such a fun day to play. Like I didn't have a good day overall yesterday, but it still just made the day so much more enjoyable.
It does. And you know what? At least we got New Year's Day, right? We'll get some New Year's Day games. I love the way the basketball does this. So I'll be sure to get some action in there. Let's see. What do we have on Christmas or on New Year's Day? We've got 5 games and some good ones at that. So 5 games on Christmas Day, and 7 games on New Year's Eve. So pretty cool. And we'll be here for you when it happens, as we always are. We appreciate you too, Jordan. Ring Rim says, "How about those Lakers, Lofty?" Yeah, bud. Yeah, your boy Lonzo really, really blew the roof off it. I hope LeBron's out for 5 months with that hamstring injury. I'm just kidding. I don't wish injury upon anybody. All right, let's get into it, Adam. We'll start with Phoenix and Orlando. Some interesting spreads today, some interesting totals. I think we're going to spend a whole lot of time on that last game between the Kings and the Clippers, 238 total. Got one at 228. That's Dallas, New Orleans. And then a couple hovering around 220, but nothing above that. 2 games expect to have really high scoring. One of them really, really high. And then a few of them very low. One of them under 197. But we start with Phoenix at Orlando, 210 total. Orlando 5-point favorites at home. You know, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about these top tier centers, not including Davis, right? And we'll talk Griffin. We'll consider him a power forward for now, but Drummond, Jokic, Towns, there's a lot of them. But Vooch can't be ignored here, Adam. This dude has 50-plus fantasy points in 11 of his last 20 starts. He has career-high marks in usage, rebound rate, assist rate, more. Hold on. I need to tell you here, and then I want to hear what you have to say on this Orlando side. Yeah, assist rate, rebounding rate, usage rate, and block rate. Career high marks in all of them. He is 8,900 on DraftKings and FanDuel. I know there's a lot of great centers at a similar price around him, but with the way Vooch is produced in a matchup against this Phoenix team that's been crushed by centers all year, there's no way I'm ignoring him just because there's other good plays priced close to him. Where are you at on Vooch in this Magic squad?
Yeah, I mean, I love him as well. The only thing that I don't like is that this is it's one of the slower paced games, but it's just such a good matchup for him that I don't really think you can ignore it. DeAndre Ayton, has not done anything really well defensively this year. He's not good at rebounding. He's not good at boxing out. Vooch should be able to just pretty much do whatever he wants on the offensive end and on the glass. You mentioned how high that he has, career high marks in basically every rate this season. Over the last month, he's averaged 1.44 DraftKings points per minute over his last 12 games. So it's really tough not to like him here. On my early crunches, I have him as my second highest owned center on DraftKings and on FanDuel. Really, really like Vooch. Easily my favorite play in this game.
Okay, we're on the same page here then. You and I haven't talked throughout the day about the slate. Sometimes we do. The only thing I think I mentioned to you was that it's annoying to write on slates like this where DraftKings and FanDuel have some drastically different pricing.
Yeah, I like playing those slates. I hate writing them and talking about them.
Right. And we'll be sure to do everything we can to differentiate for you, because there are a lot of spots where it's like, hey, he's a great play here, not as much here. But with Vooch, 8,900 on both sites is very favorable. It's a great spot. And I think the biggest thing with him though this year, Adam, has been his upside, not just his nightly production, which has hovered around 40 fantasy points, on decent nights, but the ceiling, the upside, because all of his rates are so much higher, because he's dishing out assists and seeing more opportunities as a facilitator and rebounding at a ridiculous rate, all of that makes it so his ceiling is way higher than it's been in the past as well.
Yeah, no question. And playing around 32 minutes in competitive games, it's not perfect because you do get guys like Towns that play 36 to 38,
Sure.
and Andre Drummond that probably will play around 34, but not the end of the world with how productive he is on a permanent basis.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned there are some, and I said it too, there are some really good center plays today. It's not that Vooch is your only good one, but I just would stress not to ignore him just because there are some other really good options as well. Aside from him, though, Adam, are you getting to anyone on Orlando?
A little bit of Aaron Gordon, I guess. Like, I don't mind the spot for him, but not a priority. Like, I have been like 8% of my FanDuel lineups right now. Um, just kind of a decent play in a decent spot, but there's just so many other guys that I like. I think I have even less than that on DraftKings right now.
Yeah, me too. It's really Vooch for me, and aside from that, it's pretty ugly. I mean, if you're desperate for value, maybe a DJ Augustine. His minutes have been kind of erratic, but a lot of that's been based on blowouts. In close games, he's playing 33, 34 minutes, so not a high per minute guy, but you at least have potential 33, 34 minutes from Augustine on a slate that's kind of devoid of low end value. But that's really just throwing it out there, hoping that's throwing it out at the wall and hoping something sticks. Aside from that, it's Vooch or bust for me. What about the Phoenix side? Devin Booker, $8,500 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you're getting Booker at $9,100, $100 cheaper than the most expensive shooting guard, who is Drew Holiday. Any interest in Booker here? Any interest in Phoenix as a team?
I mean, Booker, it scares me because right now I'm not really getting any, and obviously he's someone that can just go absolutely nuts. But there's a ton of guards, point guards and shooting guards in that price range today that I think have very, very similar upside and are in very nice spots. And Orlando isn't a fast team, obviously, but they're also not a bad defensive team. So while Booker can go off on anyone, it's just not a spot where I'm like forcing Booker in the lineups over guys, like Bradley Beal, like John Wall, like a handful of others that we'll talk about. So I'm not getting much Booker. I wouldn't fault anyone for getting there in tournaments. I just don't really have him. One spot that I think is kind of interesting, where if you're looking for value, you're playing large field tournaments. Jamal Crawford's ruled out of this game. He's playing 14 to 16 minutes a night. But if you look at the rotation, he's actually taking minutes from DeAnthony Melton more than or as much as anyone. So if you can get DeAnthony Melton back into that like 26 to 28 minute range at 3,500, I expect him to have like zero ownership. He obviously loses usage when he's playing with Devin Booker, but I think that's kind of just an interesting large field tournament play.
Yeah, I don't mind that, and I'm with you on Booker. I talked about him when we did the early bird podcast last night for this slate. Mentioning that I think the price is fair. I don't dislike Booker. You could see a decent game here, but it's going to be tough to get to him over a few other guys in this price range. Now, with that said, Booker's going to play 37 minutes in a close game. Like he played 55 minutes in that triple overtime game, and then played 30 minutes the next night. That was, he played 85 minutes in 2 days. So I'm not looking at that as anything outside of Devin Booker played 55 minutes the night before. So the one thing you can hang your hat on, Adam, if you are targeting Booker, is that if this game stays close, and I think it will, he's going to get 35 plus minutes, no question, barring foul trouble or injury.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And if you were looking to, I don't know, like, I don't even want to say game stack because it's just not the most appealing game, but at least like mini stack it with like Booker and Vooch. That obviously is a nice start as far as ceiling goes.
For sure. Anything else on Phoenix, or pretty much wrap it up?
No, not really. One thing I think I forgot to mention is that Jonathan Isaac is 3,900 on DraftKings. Not getting a ton of him, but I do think it's one of the better point per dollar value plays.
All right. C-Mill says, gents, I know you'll get to it, but looking forward to hear what you think on the D Rose narrative. Well, we'll get there in several games, and we'll definitely break it down, whether it's narrative or not. We'll talk about the Timberwolves and the Bulls. But first, I want to talk about Washington and Detroit. Wizards here, 5-point dogs on the road, 220.5 total. I was running some numbers today, and I like looking up. I like stats, right? Regardless of whether they're relevant or not. But I actually think this one is pretty interesting. Blake Griffin is the only player other than LeBron James averaging at least 25 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 made three-pointers per game. Giannis is, if you drop the three-pointers, it's LeBron, Giannis, and Blake. 25 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. That's how good he's been this year. Now, we're going to spend some time on Griffin and on Drummond, but let's start with Griffin, Adam, because we're looking at somebody who is facing a Wizards team that ranks dead last in front court rebounding. They're a terrible rebounding team. They're undersized. And I just don't see how one of Drummond or Griffin don't absolutely slaughter them tonight. And neither of them are really overpriced given the matchup, given their upside. This is such a good spot for this front court. I love it tonight. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. And I talked about it with Josh this morning that my projections on Drummond and on Blake were actually a little bit lower than I think they should be. And normally for basketball, I don't really manually adjust things because it's projectable enough that I don't really think I need to. But this is a spot where I'm just assuming that maybe my projections are coming in a little bit low based on previous data from Washington and not the way that they're playing right now as far as pace and rebounding goes, because this is a spot that one or both of these guys should just go absolutely nuts. They can't rebound at all. You mentioned the numbers for Blake, contributing in every category across the board, should play 36 to 38 minutes in a competitive game, should get 34 to 36 from Drummond. I have them both as really strong plays. I think that the center position being as deep as it is, I still end up with Drummond as my third or fourth option, but it has nothing to do with his spot. It's just kind of a combination of ownership on everyone around him. Blake, I have a little bit more on FanDuel, but I have plenty on both sides.
Yeah, they're really good plays. I don't know how often I want to put them both in the same lineup, but both of them, I'm going to make sure to get enough of both. Another thing too is when you look at Drummond, right? And you're like, oh, well, it's a small front court for Washington. If Keith's playing the 5, maybe he'll pull Drummond away from the paint and make life difficult. And Dwayne Casey would have to be an idiot to say, all right, well, I don't want Markieff Morris getting a couple additional open three-pointers, so I'm going to pull Drummond, whereas Drummond is going to kill them on the glass. He's going to kill them in the paint. He's going to body the hell out of them. Drummond is a much better scorer. He's the only player in the league averaging at least 15 points and 15 rebounds. The only player. Right? I mean, he's averaging almost 18 points per game. He's not just a rebounder. He's not just your Rudy Gobert type that puts balls back. No, Drummond gets work, and he gets work in the paint, and he gets actual opportunities outside of offensive rebounding. Look, I'm not worried about you having like a stretch 5 out there for Washington, Adam. The point is, Drummond is way too useful for this team on the glass and in the paint than he is as a defender ranging out to the perimeter against the stretch 5. I have no concerns about that whatsoever. Do you?
No, not at all. Doesn't seem like a smart stand for the Pistons to take if they're gonna. Because I mean, what would the alternative be? Like playing Griffin at the 5 or giving John Lure more minutes?
Right, because it's not going to be Pachulia. It's more of a liability if that's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, if
exactly right.
As a Wizards fan, if Detroit wants to take Andre Drummond off the floor because of Markieff Morris, I'm all for it.
Exactly. And what I'm saying, you hear people talk about this all the time. Well, you might pull him off the court. That's different when that's if you're not talking about the league's best rebounder and a very competent scorer. You have to really look at the situation and determine which makes most sense. And that would just make no sense at all. So I love Drummond. I love Blake. Go ahead, Adam.
Obviously, looking at past stats against the team doesn't matter a whole lot, but just because it goes along with what we were saying, faced Washington once this season at the very beginning of the year. Actually, I think it was preseason. 20 rebounds. Last 2 games of last season, 23 rebounds, 21 rebounds, 17 the game before that. Yeah, I mean, kind of just doing what you expect them to do against this Washington team.
Right. And that's not even factoring in that Drummond is a much better scorer than he was in previous seasons. I mean, maybe not better, but how about this? A lot more work. 25% usage rate this year, 21% last year. Like, he's actually an offensive focal point, whereas before he was just kind of a guy that would get work when necessary. It's hard not to love him here. Anyway, anything else for Detroit? If not, we'll talk Washington. Just go ahead and circle right through it. Cycle right.
You mentioned not really wanting Blake and Drummond together. I do think one exception is I actually like game stacking this game just because both of these teams have very, very clear focal points on the offensive end. And if this game were to, kind of just smash the Vegas total or get an overtime or something, like, that the production's coming from Griffin and Drummond on this side. It's coming from at least one of Wall and Beal on the other side. So it becomes a really, really easy game to game stack correctly if it shoots out.
Yeah, no question. And look, this isn't to say that they can't both have big games. I mean, this is why I like both of them. I think the one reason that I slightly opposed to having both of them in the same lineup is because do they hit their ceilings here? It's possible. As you mentioned, they're the two, biggest producers on this team. But also, it is a slate where the guys around Griffin and around Drummond are also in really good spots. So if I'm playing Blake and I'm fading Drummond for someone else, I'm not fading Drummond just on principle to not play him with Blake. I would be fading him also because there are some really good plays, whether it be Vooch or Jokic, so on and so forth.
Yeah, no question. I was more just trying to point out that I like the game stack here.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely. And it's also a pace-up spot for Detroit as well. So you should see more possessions, albeit a small amount, but more possessions always help, even if it's a couple. What do you make of Washington here on the other side?
John Wall's projecting really well for me, and it kind of concerns me just because I don't think Detroit's actually bad defensively. It is a pace down spot for Washington, but at the same time,
very cheap on DraftKings.
Yeah, exactly. 8,600 on DraftKings, and he's going to play 38 to 40 minutes as long as the game's competitive. You mentioned Devin Booker's minutes in the last game. Washington did the same thing. Wall and Beal both just played much shorter stints than normal, coming off that triple overtime game against Phoenix on a back-to-back. So 38, maybe more minutes from Wall. And over the last month, he has over a 30% usage rate. He has about a 44% assist percentage, obviously benefiting without Dwight Howard like we had said he would. So even though it's John Wall and we've seen him be, pretty volatile this season, I have a hard time not liking him the most out of the guys in that, like $8,600 range on DraftKings. But even at 97 on FanDuel, where the point guard position as a whole is just more expensive, I still think he's a really good play.
Yeah, me too. I will say, again, on DraftKings at least, there are some good 8K guards. We'll get to all of them, but there are a good amount of them as well, which is why, I'll just pose the question right now. Anthony Davis, 11.8 on DraftKings, 12.5 on FanDuel. He's about 24% of your total cap space on DraftKings, around 21 on FanDuel, but you have 60K cap and an additional player. Does this feel like a slate right now, with the news or lack thereof that we have? Does this feel like a slate where you're interested in trying to get Davis into your lineups?
Depends on the site for me. I'm barely getting any on DraftKings. He's hitting my ownership cap on FanDuel just because raw points kind of matter more. Like, raw points matter more for like an individual player. You can't just go based on like point per dollar because of dropping a guy. So I'm getting a lot of Anthony Davis on FanDuel, but very little on DraftKings.
All right, sounds good. Do you want to move on, or is there anybody else on Washington aside from Wall? Because I don't have anybody else, actually. I know you said
like Beal.
Stack. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Beal. The same reasons that we like Wall. He just plays so many minutes. He's obviously the second scorer on this team. And if Wall's not having a big game, then, Beal probably is. So I like him. I still think Ariza's a reasonable play. Obviously it's a big slate, but I think he's reasonable. Keefe, Keefe's too cheap on DraftKings for his upside. It's not a spot where I'm like locking him in or anything, just because there's at least a non-zero chance, and Josh mentioned it this morning, that Thomas Bryant picks up a few more minutes and you get Keefe going from like 30 to 26 or something like that, just because of the matchup. But I think that Keefe and Jeff Green are guys that you could include as like a third guy from Washington in the game stack.
All right, fair enough. Ricky Domini says, I think you can fit Davis easy. I'm not saying you can't fit him easy, right? You can make it work. What I'm saying is, I feel like my lineups are a whole lot more appealing when I'm living in that 8K range. And I go from having, say Davis, and he said play Zeller at center. I'm just using this example. Davis and Zeller, I'd feel more comfortable with a two 8K guys in there because that's pretty much the comparison. And I feel like some of these 8K guys were, creeping up towards 9K because, right, like, Blake Griffin is $2,800 less. Vooch is 2,900 less. You obviously make the argument that Davis is the only guy with the 80 fantasy point upside. Maybe your rogue Jokic game, but I like the balanced approach right now, given the news or again lack thereof that we have. That is the reason that I don't have as much Davis because I like the balanced approach more, and I think there are a lot of guys that are priced too low on DraftKings, whereas Anthony Davis is the highest price point that he's been in. I don't know, the season. I don't know if he's hit 12K this year, and if he has, it's been a while.
Yeah, right there with you. And on top of that, it also, with Davis being like the only star on the slate, if you roster Davis, it kind of just forces you on to the same roster construction as everyone else who's rostering Davis. So not only does it, kind of make you play marginal value plays that don't have a ton of upside, but it also just kind of gives you really similar lineups. And to your point about, the going balanced with DraftKings, because you're not limited in your flexibility. Like if you just use the salaries, the first example that comes to mind, like you can go Davis and Zeller, or you can go Vucevic and Russell. Obviously different positions, but you can basically make it work. And I just don't think there's any question on which one of those has a higher ceiling.
Right. That's what it comes down to. And a lot of those 8K guys, a lot of those sub 9K guys do have easy 60 fantasy point upside. It's not that you're just hoping for a 48 spot. And that's what definitely moves the needle for me. Speaking of Russell, we've got Brooklyn at home hosting the Charlotte Hornets. Brooklyn 1.5 point favorites. They've won 8 of their last 9, Adam. Maybe 7 of their last 9. Either way, they're winning a lot of games. Yeah, 8 of their last 9. And they're playing pretty good basketball right now. You have guys like Kurucs on FanDuel at 4K. You just mentioned Russell. We'll get your take on him. And then we'll talk about Kemba, who's $8,400 on DraftKings. Let's start with Brooklyn. It's a team that I'm having a little bit of trouble getting to here. Where do you stand on them? It sounds like you like them a little more than I do.
I don't like most of them. I just like Russell. I think that he's I think he's too cheap in tournaments. He's only 6,900 on FanDuel, so he's coming in as one of my highest owned shooting guards there. But even on DraftKings at 7,500, you have all those 8K and 8K plus guys. But once you get beyond that, it gets a little bit thinner. And so, not getting as much as I have on FanDuel, but still, have Russell as one of my higher owned guards right now. Just because, he when he plays well, he should get around 32 minutes. And it's just the spot where, he has that 50 plus fantasy point upside at 7,500. So I want a lot of him.
All right. What about on FanDuel, where Dinwiddie 6,900 point guard eligible, Russell 6,900 shooting guard eligible. So on DraftKings, you have Dinwiddie and Russell both point guard shooting guard eligible. Russell's 7,500, Dinwiddie's 7K. So you got a nice price difference there. But 6,900 on FanDuel, both of them, and both are at different positions.
On the crunch I did before the show on FanDuel, I got 45% Russell and I got 3% Dinwiddie.
Okay. Fair enough. You have any interest in anything outside of that? Again, like I said, Kurucs is $500 above the minimum. Alan Crabb is out. He has played 33 minutes or more in back-to-back games. The obvious concern for me is, where is the production coming from? And because of the volatility, it makes it tough. So on DraftKings, where he's 4,600, I'm just not interested. Because you look, the one game, 24 points, 10 free throw attempts, 4 for 5 from 3-point range. The next game, he has 34 points, but it's because he hauled in 10 rebounds. I don't see it being consistent. If I'm playing Kurucs, it's going to be because he's cheap, and I'm hoping for 30 plus, 33 plus minutes. But once you get up into that 46, that mid to high 4K range on DraftKings, I'm just not going to pull the trigger. What about you?
Yeah, I think he's a much better play on FanDuel, as you mentioned. Looking at the guys on DraftKings, if I had to take one of these forwards from Brooklyn, it would actually be Ed Davis, even though he probably plays, a lot less minutes. He's only 3,600, and he has that path if Allen gets in foul trouble or plays poorly to get, a few more minutes. I think that he's actually the best play out of the Brooklyn guys, but they all project as just, pretty marginal, like point per dollar plays where you have to get pretty lucky as far as, a weird game in terms of playing time or field goal efficiency to actually get a ceiling out of them at their prices.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why I need to do it where he's cheap enough. Me talking about Kuruks,
Yep.
where he's cheap enough to not burn you in the event that he doesn't get to the line 10 times or attempt 10 free throws, because that's not something that you expect to happen going forward. On the other side, though, Adam, I think this is where I talk about pricing disparities being huge from DraftKings to FanDuel. On FanDuel, Kemba Walker is the most expensive point guard. He's 9,800. He is the fourth highest priced player on this entire slate. On DraftKings, he's 8,400, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players more expensive than Kemba. I know Kemba hasn't been spectacular recently, but you're still talking about a guy with 30+% usage and assist rate that plays 38 minutes in close games and has a matchup against the Brooklyn team that, despite playing well, still has a bottom 10 defensive rating and still is, league average or worse at defending opposing guards. I feel like this is a spot where Kemba Walker at 8,400, it's not a price that I can just ignore. He's too cheap here. And we know he's someone that on more than a couple occasions has flashed 60 fantasy point upside this year. That's just too cheap for me to overlook.
Yeah, there's no question the ceiling's there. It's just how deep the position is for me. And I still have him behind guys like Wall, behind Oladipo, who, obviously we'll talk about. And then he's kind of in the mix there with like Bradley Beal and Booker and Luka Doncic. Obviously different position, but same price point. So I'm not really getting a lot of him, but I kind of feel the same way about Booker, where he's not the guy that I'm focusing on, but I don't think there's a huge difference between him and the guys around him.
It's kind of tough because we haven't even talked about De'Aaron Fox yet. Now, on FanDuel, it's different. You're getting a good price on him, 8,200. We'll get there. But Fox has been outstanding lately, and he's also grouped in that same price range. Like, they're on DraftKings, you have if you were to take the point guard and shooting guard eligible players, there is a $600 difference between, let's say, Fox, Walker, Booker, Wall, Oladipo, Holiday, and Doncic. Like, it's 7 guys that are priced in between 82 to 8,800. And while I'm not saying all of them are top plays, you can make an argument for all of them because their price points are very reasonable, regardless of matchup.
Yeah, no question. Even though I mentioned liking Wall. Right now, our ownership projections have John Wall at 19% on DraftKings and Kemba at 7%. So it's a spot where once I recrunch my lineups and factor in ownership percentage, I could certainly see where I kind of end up even on Wall and then just being overweight on Kemba because of the ownership.
It's funny. I'm usually the one that has less interest in Kemba when he's down in salary a bit. I'm a little bit surprised to hear the take on this because usually you love getting at Kemba when he's at a discounted cost. Now, obviously, yes, there's a lot to go around here. There are a lot of good players at the position at good price points, but it is, of course, notable that he is $800 or $1,400 cheaper on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel, and he's the 5th highest priced point guard compared to the most expensive point guard. Obviously, no multi-position eligibility. I just, what I see here, Adam, I think the reason that I have interest or more interest in Walker, I think, than you do is I see this game, and obviously Vegas has it at 1.5 point spread. I could see this game just being really close throughout the whole entire game and getting, upwards of 39, 40 minutes from Kemba, which if that's the case, I'd feel really good about his prospects at 8,400. So
it's definitely fair. He's just projecting a little bit lower than other guys for me. And that's all it is. Like,
right.
I don't necessarily even want to say I feel comfortable with it. I just have him behind those guys.
Right. And I don't think you can make an argument for or against, or you can make an argument for or against it because there are so many good plays here. Anything else for Charlotte, though?
Yeah, I think Jeremy Lamb is a good play. Like, he's still playing big minutes. Malik Monk is out of the rotation more often than he's not, and it's opened up a higher minutes floor for Jeremy Lamb. Has about a 22% usage rate over the last month. Just a little bit too cheap, I think. And then Cody Zeller, as mentioned in chat earlier, I do think he's one of the better point per dollar plays on DraftKings. And when you compare Cody Zeller to other guys in that price range, regardless of position, I think he's one of the best plays. It's just that you are giving up a spot where you could roster a center, but obviously there's enough high upside guards as well. So Cody Zeller, I think, is a perfectly fine value play.
I'd rather spend 800 more on Dedmon with Alex Len expected to sit, but Zeller is cheap, and I think he's been the guy. You ever notice this? We only ever mention Cody Zeller when there's not a lot of value on a slate. Otherwise, it's like, because it's like he's there if you need him and he's cheap and he should get some minutes, but no one feels. Yeah. And then it's like, well, you'll have to play him over another center, which also sucks. Have you seen his minutes lately, though? Is that foul trouble or more so than anything else? I haven't looked into it.
I don't have it in front of me, but I know
28 close games, close enough.
Marvin Williams has been getting more time at center, but I don't think that has as much an impact on him as the backup centers.
Okay.
He had 4 fouls in the last game against Boston. He fouled out against Detroit. He had 4 fouls against Cleveland.
Right, that's what I'm saying. The fouls have been there. I just don't know if they were
blowout against the Lakers. So the last games where he wasn't in foul trouble and it wasn't a blowout was 37 minutes against the Knicks in overtime, 27 against Detroit, 26 against the Knicks, 32 against Denver.
All right. Nelson says, do you guys ever get tired of going over these players on a day-by-day basis? By the way, happy holidays. Love your show. On them every day. Thanks, man. With baseball, yes, I do. I'm just completely honest. With basketball, I don't. Because with baseball, it's like, all right, this pitcher is facing this team, or this team smashes lefties. And, Adam, you can obviously dig way deeper into basketball, and we do. And for those of you that are relatively new to Awesemo, when baseball season rolls around, you'll see how we break it down. I think we get super deep into the analytics, which you need to with baseball. But with basketball, I don't get bored of it because you have the rotations and you have the minute projections, whereas with baseball, it's like, he should get 4 or 5 plate appearances against this, and then here's the bullpen. So there's obviously things that aren't predictable, of course, but with basketball, there's so much more each and every day that goes into it that each matchup, you're really changing your analysis every day. It's not the same thing you're saying about each player.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so overall, I agree with you on basketball over baseball, but I will say that if I could just do one thing 365 days a year, it would just be digging into pitching. So sure. That's my favorite out of anything. But I'd much rather talk basketball than hitters.
Yeah, forget about even baseball. I'm saying the reason it doesn't get boring with basketball is because there is always something different, even if you're talking about all of the same players.
Yeah, I mean, between rotations and injuries and matchups, it's the players a lot of times are the same as far as he doesn't really have a high ceiling or whatever, but matchups change and it makes it different at least.
Yeah, it's always in flux. All right, Miami and Toronto. Kyle Lowry. Not looking like he's going to play here. Serge Ibaka's probable, though. Rodney Magruder's also probable. The Miami Heat at home are 3.5-point dogs, 208 total. I want to start with the Heat, though. I want to talk about James Johnson. 30 minutes against Milwaukee, assuming a bunch of that was to combat Giannis Antetokounmpo. And he had a solid game. And then 25 minutes the next day, did not play in the fourth quarter. That game was not only was that game the second of a back-to-back, but they routed Orlando, ended up winning that game by a huge margin. It was over by the end of the third quarter. James Johnson, though. Jarek Jones Jr. played 9 minutes the one game, 22 the next game. Rodney Magruder's probable. Don't see that making much of an impact. But I got to wonder. It looks like James Johnson's finally working his way back from that hernia surgery, and it seems like Eric Spoelstra's finally starting to have a bit more confidence in him. Do you think we see some extended James Johnson run again today, especially with Kawhi Leonard on the other side of this game, attempting 20 shots per game since the start of this month?
Yeah, I like Johnson. I think that he's too cheap here. You mentioned the minutes against Milwaukee, and then he basically was playing the same rotation in that last game. He just didn't get the fourth quarter because the game
blew out. Clearly a blowout. Right, exactly. Right. He was on pace for 30.
Right. The price tag's down, and you mentioned Kawhi. It's another guy for him to defend, and that's not even mentioning Pascal Siakam or even potentially Serge Ibaka. So there's plenty of guys for James Johnson to deal with here on the defensive end, and that normally has a big impact on his minutes. Also, Justice Winslow is essentially playing point guard, so that's one of the wings, power forwards that isn't really taking James Johnson's minutes right now. So yeah, I think that he's one of the better values on the slate. I had mentioned Jonathan Isaac earlier. Similar price point, I'm getting more James Johnson than Jonathan Isaac.
Me too. I don't have much Isaac. I do have some James Johnson. Is there some risk here? Certainly. But again, you're not getting a ton of value. Hell, if you're playing Anthony Davis, there's a good chance you're going to have a bunch of James Johnson in those Davis lineups. And you know what? Johnson's a 0.93 fantasy point per minute guy for his career. He used to be better at producing in less playing time, but that's a while ago. Guy's getting older. Just give me some minutes here, and I think you'll be okay. If I were to get even 25 minutes, I don't think kills you here. But let's just say his rotation is similar to the Milwaukee and the Orlando one, assuming that game wasn't blowing out. You're putting him on pace for another 30 minutes. And I do think that Spoelstra's going to want him defensively against Kawhi Leonard because the alternative is Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah, I agree completely.
All right. I know you weren't listening to me there. That's okay.
The alternative is Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah, it's okay. I saw your head turn. I was trying to catch you off guard. It's a good enough spot. Not the greatest per minute guy, but 3,700 on DraftKings to me is too cheap. Let me ask you this though: on FanDuel, James Johnson and I have an opinion on this. James Johnson and Kurucs are both power forward eligible. Kurucs is 4K and Johnson is 4,400, whereas Kurucs is 46 on DraftKings. Johnson's 3,700. I don't even think that's a debate. But on FanDuel, do you have a preference?
I have a little bit more Kurucs than Johnson. I think that it's a spot where, depending on ownership, you could certainly just kind of do the opposite of the field, though, because I think that they're really close.
All right. I don't really know if I have anything else that I'm interested in with Miami here. I don't love the spot. James Johnson was the one guy that stood out to me based on just per dollar appeal alone. Anybody you like here outside of Johnson?
No, I mean, he's my highest owned guy for Miami. I have some Hassan Whiteside just because he's cheap. I think I have I have some Winslow sprinkled in, but Johnson's my highest.
Did we lose him? Did we lose you? No, you're
I'm
back. You're back. Well, we lost you for a second there. You were cutting out. Johnson's your highest owned guy. You have a little bit of Whiteside, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Whiteside's 6,600. It is really cheap. The crazy thing is, though, even at that price tag, you have to ask yourself about opportunity cost because the center position's so deep.
Yeah, completely agree. And, I mean, Whiteside can just so easily, or not easily, but he can give you 50 plus. So, yeah, but still, yeah, the opportunity cost is through the roof. Because if you get 35 or 40 from Whiteside, even though it's decent for that price, it's probably not really doing you any favors at the center position.
Right. And look, to be fair, he's averaging 1.43 fantasy points per minute. If you get 29 minutes from him, you're looking at 40 plus, 41 plus fantasy points with way more upside. So like you said, clearly has 50 plus upside, but unlike other slates where it makes her a great pivot, here you're actually going to need, the 45 plus from him is what we're saying here. Right. 38 isn't going to cut it just because he's 6,600. All right. Toronto, let's talk about Kawhi Leonard. I mentioned at the top of this game, Adam, and he's been a guy that you and I have not been that high on this season just because the price. He's the Noah Syndergaard of the NBA, as we like to say. Look, his assist rate is not – he does not dish out a lot of assists. He's actually a very low assist rate for a quote-unquote star, and he is a star. I love the guy. But overall, there are some things here that say, that's why we usually don't pay upwards of $10K for him. But he's attempting 20 field goal attempts per game over his last 12. He's played 35 or more minutes in 11 of them. And he's somebody that will get you a lot of steals and has actually the third highest usage rate in the entire league since the start of December. So I don't think Lowry being off makes the biggest difference just because Leonard isn't a big-time facilitator. But you know that he's going to shoulder a huge offensive load here against Miami. Curious to know, what are you doing with Kawhi Leonard at 95 on DraftKings and 10-4 on FanDuel?
I'm not getting there. I just think the price tag's a little higher than I would like. Obviously small forward's not the best position, but on FanDuel you do have Gallinari at 7,300 at small forward, which is really nice. You have Rudy Gay, who we'll talk about. There's Ariza. Like there are mid-range small forward options that are perfectly fine. And then on DraftKings, the price tag's obviously better, but with the way that roster construction is, you can't compare him to just forwards. You have to look at everything else, and it basically just puts him right in that same price range as guys like Drummond and Vucevic and Karl Anthony Towns. All guys that I like more than Kawhi. So I'm not really getting there. It doesn't make me feel great, but I feel better about not having Kawhi than I do about being low on Booker or Kemba at their prices.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I still like him at 94 on DraftKings. I don't mind him, but once again, let's talk opportunity cost. It's super important on this slate. So yes, you have Leonard at 9,500. So we have Jokic at 96, and look, with MPE, I'm mentioning all of these guys because it all comes into play, and I just want your take. I want to know, you don't have to give me an exact number, but kind of where you would rank him. You could say top, middle, or bottom tier amongst these players. Jokic, Leonard, Towns, Drummond, Griffin, Vooch, Holiday, Oladipo, Wall, Booker, Kemba, Doncic, Fox. They're all within, around $1,000 of each other.
Yeah, I mean, he's toward the bottom for me when you factor in those centers.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's tough because what are you really hoping for in terms of a ceiling game or upside from Kawhi? 60?
Yeah.
Right? 60? Yeah. I don't hate him. I think I like him a little more than you do, but I am almost certain I'm not going to end up with a lot of him because it's not necessary. But I put it this way: if I'm seeing Leonard pop up in lineups, I'm not going to think it's a bad play. It's absolutely not. He's going to have to do a lot in this game. But I just would caution people and want to get your take. We'll move on after this. Caution people that just because Kawhi being off has way more of an effect on Lowry than Lowry being off has an effect on Leonard is basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah, Lowry has a 17.5 or an 18% usage rate when Kawhi's on the floor this year. So he's taking a back seat regardless of what Kawhi does. Or, I mean, he's taking a back seat when he's out there with Kawhi. It's not like taking him out helps Kawhi a ton.
Right, and Kawhi Leonard just isn't someone that's going to give you 10 assists in a game. So Lowry being off doesn't help him a ton there, and Lowry already isn't shooting a lot. So that's kind of where you get your numbers from. Do you have anything else on Toronto? Because Fred VanVleet isn't exactly discounted anymore, Adam.
I like VanVleet on FanDuel specifically. I have next to no interest in getting there on DraftKings. I'll take my chances if he burns me, he burns me. But he's like 5,600 on FanDuel. So on my initial crunch that I did before the show, he was my second highest own point guard behind Wall.
Yeah, and 59 on DraftKings. There's no way I can go there. I just can't do it. Especially with how many good guards we have at good prices. I can't do it. Like, would you rather have Trae Young at 59 or VanVleet at 59?
Neither one, but Trae Young.
If you had to have one. Yeah.
Trae Young.
Yeah, me too. Jamal Murray at 63 or VanVleet at 59?
Jamal Murray.
Right. So that's where I'm at here. You want to move on to Atlanta, Indiana?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Indiana, 7-point favorites on the road, 217.5 total. Huge pace-up spot for them. Let's start on the Pacers side and work our way over to the Hawks. We'll start with the road team here. Oladipo, 8,700 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. He's the fifth highest priced shooting guard here. What's interesting about Oladipo is that he's been all over the map since returning, Adam, right? He's played 7 games since being back in the lineup. He has 50-plus fantasy points in 2 of them and less than 35 in 4 of them. But this is one of those spots that you have to at least say this could be a legitimate get-right spot for Oladipo against a Hawks team that plays at the league's fastest pace, averaging 8 more possessions per 48 than the Pacers this year. That's a huge, huge number. And, of course, the Hawks have just been crushed by opposing shooting guards this season in almost every category. What are you doing with Oladipo?
Yeah, it's a really interesting spot because if you go and you look at the 7 games he's played since coming back from injury, he's had a couple of big games, like you said, but his highest usage in any of those games is 26.2%. And he said he's still not 100% healthy. So on one hand, I think it's concerning, but the matchup and the price tag is what it really comes down to. It's a really good matchup, like you said, against Atlanta, and everyone knows that the price tag is really appealing. And if you think about where he would be priced against Atlanta if he weren't like not really playing that well right now, he'd be $9,400, $9,500. So I just think that any risk there is in him not being 100% healthy or him deferring more to Miles Turner or whatever, I think is mitigated by the fact that he's like $8,500.
The usage, and I'm glad you brought that up because it kind of jumps off the page at you when you see what he's done since he's returned. It almost makes me like him a little bit more because you're saying, all right, well, Oladipo dropped 52 fantasy points against Brooklyn, only took 14 shots, got to the line. He took 6 free throw attempts. 57 fantasy points against the Knicks, only took 13 shots, got to the line 8 times. The reason I mention that is because it just goes to show you the immense upside that he has outside of just scoring. So if you do get your 30 real point Oladipo game, there's a very good chance that he's going to erupt. And now you're getting a team that's averaging almost 107 possessions per 48, just a ridiculously fast pace that they play at. I still think Oladipo is too cheap here, especially at $8,500 on FanDuel. He's $200 more than Doncic now, based on their recent play. I get it, but still, on DraftKings, one wrench that gets thrown into the works, and I don't want to jump all over the map, Adam, is that DeRozan's down below 8K. So we'll definitely get there. But I'm with you on Oladipo. I like him a lot here, and there's no way that I can get away from him in this spot. I just think it's only a matter of time before you see him start to become far more involved. And even if he doesn't, he can still give you 55 fantasy points, on 13, 14 field goal attempts. He's done it twice over his last 6 games. What about the rest of this team, though? Because maybe I'm missing it. Maybe there's someone else here for Indiana that I'm missing.
Darren Collison at 45. So on FanDuel, you have Collison at 4,500 and you have Miles Turner at 7,300. I think they're both pretty interesting plays. Obviously, a really good spot. Turner's been playing absolutely phenomenally recently, and he's like $700 less expensive on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. I like both of those guys. I like Thad Young quite a bit in a spot where he should be able to pick up some defensive stats and do well in transition. Oladipo is my favorite guy, but I think the mixing and matching those cheaper guys is a pretty good way to go in tournaments.
Yeah, so the thing with this team is that in this matchup, even if Oladipo has a solid game, it's Zach LaVine is probable now, by the way. And Alex Len has been ruled out, so we'll get there in just a minute. Jeremy Lin is active, so is Amari Spellman, and so is Dwayne Dedman. That's good. We get that news when we need it. With me, am I oblivious to the fact that other players in this game are going to probably have big numbers? No, absolutely not. I'm just having a tough time deciding on which ones I think have the best chance of doing so. I mean, Miles Turner is 8K. I know it's a great spot, Adam, but I don't see myself getting to an $8,000 Miles Turner on DraftKings. 73 on FanDuel is a lot more palatable, but I just can't do it on DraftKings. And just across the board here, like you mentioned, Thad Young, that's a pretty reasonable price point, but I feel like it's only a matter of time also before he comes back down to earth a little bit. I'm just having a tough time being able to prioritize any of them. I think you would make a more reasonable point or viable point in that your best option here is probably to mix and match and hope that a couple of them can have big games. But for those guys that are only playing in a 3 max, how would you suggest approaching this? Because not everyone's maxing out tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I have Thad Young as right now. That crunch I did before the show, I ended up with 30% Young on DraftKings and 28% on FanDuel. Almost 20% Darren Collison on FanDuel, like 10% on DraftKings. Turner was my third highest owned center on FanDuel. I don't have any on DraftKings.
Okay, sounds good. Atlanta. I mentioned the reason Zeller to me wasn't that appealing is because Dedman, I know he's a little bit more expensive, but Alex Len is out. Miles Plumlee isn't coming back for a while. So they don't really even have a traditional backup center. You've got maybe Amari Spellman. Maybe Collins even sees a few minutes at the 5. But to me, Len was getting some big run recently. We saw Dedman's minutes decline in 3 straight games, whereas Len played 21, 21, and 35. Uh, I feel like Dedmon is in line for some really good minutes here. He's a +1 per minute producer on the season and throughout a bunch of seasons for his career. I know he's not super cheap anymore, but uh, it's an interesting spot for Dedmon, man. Getting probably locked into good minutes, and unless we see Lloyd Pierce do something he hasn't done. What do you think about this front court?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, Len being out helps to solidify Dedmon's minutes, and he's a good enough producer anyway that he should be able to do fine here. The concern, Spellman being back, does concern me a little bit because it is a body that they can use. Poitras, I think, is good to go as well. So there are ways for Dedmon to lose minutes still, but Len being out certainly helps. I have Dedmon projected for about 30 minutes here. Wouldn't be surprising if he got to 32. I think he's a perfectly fine value option.
All right. Yeah, I like his upside here, and I also think you're going to want a bigger body in here up against someone like Miles Turner, who's just been playing significantly better basketball lately, which definitely has me interested more in Dedmon than I would have been previously. What do you make of John Collins? Adam. John Collins is basically just an instant double double now. This guy has been spectacular this year. I mean, I'm loving everything I've seen from John Collins. I'm actually watching Atlanta Hawks games because of John Collins, and I never thought I'd be willingly watching Atlanta Hawks games. I'm loving it right now. He is probable, but again, your price point here is fair. It's fair with how he's been producing. Does he have the upside here to give you what you need against a decent Indiana defense though? What are you doing with a guy like Collins? $7,600 on DraftKings, where he's power forward and center. On FanDuel, he's 8,300 in power forward eligible.
Yeah, I mean, kind of tough to prioritize him just because Indiana plays so slow and they are a good defensive team. But I do like that DraftKings price tag. Right now, we also have him projected for less than 5% ownership on DraftKings. If that stays the case when we update our ownership before lock, it will make me have more Collins just because I think that's too low. So that's something
No
I'll definitely
question.
keep an eye on. A little bit harder, I think, to get there on FanDuel. Like I would just rather get to Blake at the kind of more expensive price range.
Yeah, I'm with Fan or DraftKings is more appealing. Also you have like a sub 8K Julius Randle on DraftKings as well. Some of these guys' prices have been kind of strange, but you know what? We take what we get. I I like Collins. I just think he's been ridiculously consistent, and that's really nice. But I feel like you're probably going to end up in that like 40 to 43 fantasy point range here, which is not bad, but also, what? I'll put it this way, just to rephrase it. I don't have I don't have an issue with fading Collins either, is where I'm at. You know what
Yeah,
I
no,
mean? I
I
don't see
agree.
him as a must. Yeah, I don't see him as a priority. But man, he's been awesome. He's just been fantastic. Uh, what about anyone else for Atlanta? I know you're not on Trae Young, and I don't blame you for that. His price continues to plummet. You got Kevin Herter and Bazemore. Prince is out for another 2 to 3 weeks. Anything here outside of the front court?
No, I just hate the spot for Atlanta.
Yep, pretty much. It's so much more favorable for Indiana. For me, it's Oladipo, and then as you mentioned, mix and match. Some guys hope that maybe a Thad Young or a Collison hits, where they're very cheap. And then on the other side, Dedmon, I do think he gets actually above 30 minutes in this game, and at 5,200, that's pretty favorable with power forward eligibility. Collins can take it or leave it, although it's a fair price on DraftKings. Chicago, Minnesota. Let's jump right into this one, Adam. The Bulls 4-point home dogs here, 211.5 total. Go ahead and give me your quick rundown on Chicago first. Looks like Levine is going to play. From everything we've seen, he's expected to come off the bench. I don't know if we can really accurately predict what it's going to look like for Dunn and Levine in the first game based on the minutes and unpredictability here. But go ahead and give us your best estimate on how this rotation breaks down at the guard spot. Cameron Payne is also available for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Levine being back, assuming he comes off the bench and doesn't play, 36 minutes, there's still value in Chris Dunn, but I just don't feel nearly as confident in him as I did if Levine were out. So I've cut back Dunn's usage. I've cut back his minutes by a couple to like 32 to 34. So I think he's okay, but he's certainly not a priority. I took minutes away from Arcidiacono and Shaq Harrison. It basically just makes it so I'm not interested in anything on
Either.
Chicago that much.
Right. Me neither. Both of them are priced at like with Levine. I'll tell you this much: if Boylan said Levine's going to come back, no limitations into the starting lineup, I think you could convince me that 7,100 is too cheap. But
Oh yeah,
right, you know what I mean? If it's like, okay, even with Dunn healthy and playing full minutes, if I know Levine can play upwards of 38 minutes, that's way too cheap. But I don't know if he's going to play 27 minutes off the bench.
right.
It's an easy spot to just get
The
away from.
fact he just like rushed back for a game against Minnesota kind of scares me, just because like, what if he goes and plays 36 minutes? But yeah, I mean, not something I'm actually gonna put in lineups.
Yeah, I have a little bit of tournament interest here, only because he could come off the bench and still play 32 minutes.
Right.
And he's just been very productive. But most of this season, he's been without Chris Dunn, so we don't really have a relevant sample on what we're going to get from Levine. And yes, he's been good at him, but a lot of that is because his usage is so high. Even though this team plays at a slower pace, his usage has been so high, and so have his minutes. But on a per minute basis, you're still only looking at a tick above one, right? I think it's probably like 1.08 or something. Let's see here, because it's 39 fantasy points, 1.1, which is not bad at all. But that's knowing that we've been getting 36 to 40 minutes a night from Levine. You cut that down to 28 in your first game back, you're still not getting what you need at 7,100. That's the problem.
Right. I mean, if you like sprinkle him into some tournament lineups, basically you're hoping that you just get what Devin Booker did in his first game back from injury.
Exactly.
Where, everyone was like, there's no way he plays, more than 30, 32, and he went out and played 42 minutes in his first game back.
And to be fair, Levine's only been out for like less than 2 weeks. So I don't know.
Right.
I still think
if you were starting, I would be more inclined to take a chance, like you said. The fact he's coming off the bench, though, it just makes it harder, obviously, for him to get that many minutes when we know he's starting on the bench.
Exactly, yeah. What about Minnesota here? Derrick Rose facing his former Chicago Bulls team. And as you mentioned, rushing Levine back, yes, facing his former Timberwolves team. But I don't really care too much about that if the minutes are going to be limited. Derrick Rose, questionable, game time decision. But Rose said he expects to play. I expect him to play. Still not happy to see a guy with such an injury or checkered injury history being a game time decision. Is he playing because it's against the Bulls? Who the hell knows? In Chicago, I don't. But I do know that people want to talk about it. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, supposedly he practiced yesterday, too. I say supposedly because that was the report, but we're talking about Minnesota, so who the hell knows?
Exactly. Right.
But yeah, I'm assuming Rose plays. I think that Levine being back moves Derrick Rose ahead of Chris Dunn for me. So I'll have a little bit more Derrick Rose than I was planning on. But and I mean, he's obviously been good. He's averaged over a fantasy point per minute without Butler or Jeff Teague on the floor this season. Assuming he's healthy, he probably plays around 34 minutes here. So he ends up being a good play. I guess kind of the problem is that there's no superstars on this slate outside of Davis. And so it makes it so it's easy to get to that like 8K range as opposed to, like normal slates where someone at sub 7K with Rose is more appealing. But I still think he's a perfectly fine play. The guy from Minnesota, obviously, that I absolutely love, those Karl Anthony Towns. He's my highest owned center right now, especially factoring in that currently he's projected for lower ownership than basically every center around him, which has been the case a ton this season. He's had some ugly game logs because of foul trouble or blowouts or whatever, but there's just no questioning the upside that this guy has. He has a 28.7% usage rate without Teague or Butler on the floor this year. He's averaged 1.36 fantasy points per minute. He plays close to 38 minutes in competitive games. It's a great matchup against Chicago where he should be able to rebound and score at will. I absolutely love Karl Anthony Towns here, and if he's going to be the lowest owned guy out of that group, he'll be my highest owned center.
All right, fair enough. You like him a little bit more than I do. I think you always like Towns a little more than I do, though, which is fair. So we'll just continue that trend again today. But I have no issues with him. I like Vooch and Drummond ahead of Towns, though. And I feel like we had this exact same conversation the last time we did the show. So, yeah, nothing's changed. We'll move it along here. We have a couple games to get to still. Anything else from Minnesota?
No.
All right, Memphis and Cleveland. I have a feeling we can burn through this one at a expedited pace. Memphis is a 10-point favorite. This game is a 196.5 total. I still like Conley's price point on DraftKings because you're talking about a guy, all of his rates are at career highs or right around there, and he's been excellent this year. It's still going to be tough to get him into my lineups. And on the other side, sure, Hood and Nwaba are out, but what a miserable spot for these Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, just an absolutely awful price, a spot for Cleveland, and they still have bodies. Like just because Hood and Nwaba are out doesn't mean that we're in that situation like after the Alec Burks trade where they have like 8 guys that are going to play. I don't think you get enough minutes from these guys to make up for the fact that A, they're not very good, and B, Memphis defensively is good and plays really slow. So no priorities for me from the Cleveland side. No priorities from the Memphis side either, unless you want to talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. at 1% ownership. He's someone that has just been popping into my lineups because he's priced similarly to guys that I expect to be really popular, and I have them projected, close to them. So he's just been kind of in a lot of my lineups because I factor that in. But from a you know optimal play perspective or cash perspective, there's not really anything here.
Yeah. Anything else on this game in general that you want to touch on, or should we move it along?
I'm good.
All right, so am I. I'm happy to move past this. By the way, if you want to check out, it's not Christmas anymore. The 24 days of giveaway is over, but we still have ways to check out awesemo.com completely free. And that code down there in the bottom right, Deeper Dive, all you have to do is go to awesemo.com, go to the homepage, click Join Now, and select your plan. Make sure you select the add-on for Fantasy Cruncher so you can check out everything while you're here. And do it when you get to the checkout. You'll be prompted. You enter a promo code Deeper Dive, all one word, and you'll get a free week behind paywall of all of our content, including Cruncher, including Slack, everything for a week, so you can test it before you buy it. I think you'll like it, but even if you don't, it's free, and there's really no risk in doing so. So the promo code is Deeper Dive, and hopefully we'll see you over there. Adam, let's keep it going here. New Orleans and Dallas. Dallas right now, 2-point home favorites, 228 total, the second highest total on this slate. Nikola Mirotic is sidelined. Dennis Smith Jr. is also still out. You're getting a price hike or a steady increase in salary for Doncic. Yet on the other side, Randall still remains sub 8K on DraftKings. Start with whichever team you'd like here, and we'll go back and forth.
So, I mean, the New Orleans side, obviously Anthony Davis, the only superstar on the slate. Mentioned earlier that I'm getting a lot of him on FanDuel, much less on DraftKings. I think we talked about it at length. It's not to talk anyone off of rostering him. Like, he's clearly the highest projected guy on the slate, and he has a ridiculous ceiling here. It's not a bad spot at all against Dallas. He does take a little bit of a hit playing alongside Julius Randle. Not that affects his ceiling too much, but it does affect his median projection a bit. New Orleans is just kind of expensive, though. I mean, you have Davis priced up. You have Drew Holiday priced up to where I don't want to roster him over all the guards that are in that 8K range. Randall at center on FanDuel is basically impossible for me to get to. On DraftKings, I think it's a little bit easier at 7,900, but I have him projected really similarly to John Collins. You have LaMarcus Aldridge, who's less expensive. So it's still just real. And then you have the guys from the Clippers. So it's really, really difficult for me to prioritize anything from this New Orleans side.
It really is. I think Randall's fine here, but it's really it's not tough, obviously, to get Davis if you wanted to squeeze him in there. Yeah, there's players to do so. But what it's tough for me is to justify Davis and a mid 4K player and over 2 8K players, Adam. That's what is difficult for me.
Yep. And then if you extend that further and you move it to like a 3v3, it gets even harder.
Exactly. What about Dallas?
I think Doncic is interesting. The problem obviously is that, like you said, his price tag has come up, but the assist percentage has just been through the roof over the last month without Dennis Smith Jr. on the floor. Usage rate is up to almost 30% as well. We're seeing him, just kind of put it all together and show a higher ceiling than he had been. So tough to say that he's, a priority amongst all these guys. But I think that if his projected ownership were to come in as, kind of the lowest out of the group, it would get him a boost.
Yeah, that's all I have. Maybe a flyer on Barea when he's playing well, you get good numbers, but that's really it for me. And I can't prioritize somebody like DeAndre Jordan here, even though his price has come down. Again, opportunity cost is very difficult here. It's fine price, don't get me wrong. I have no quarrels with playing him, but I'm not huge on it either. And that's where I'm at for the rest of this team. Wesley Matthews, another guy, if he plays, fine price point, he'll probably be someone that you see paired with Anthony Davis in a lot of spots. But if I'm not playing Anthony Davis, I don't see myself having anybody like Perea or Wesley Matthews because I'm not getting there and I don't need to get there, which is the kind of the point. You'd think we'd have more to talk about on this game, Adam, but there isn't that much in terms of being able to prioritize them.
I will be game stacking this game some just because I don't have a lot of exposure to it outside of game stacks. And also just, obviously it's one of the more likely games to just shoot out. But because I think all the plays are kind of overpriced, it's just a spot where I want them all together and look for like an entire outlier game flow as opposed to trying to, hit on one or two of these guys.
All right, we got 2 games to go in about 3 minutes. Let's get through it and make sure we don't miss anything. Live Before Lock is coming up next, so don't go anywhere. They're going to certainly help you out as we go up till 7 p.m. lock. Spurs and Denver. Spurs 4-point favorites, 216 total. They finally weren't involved in a blowout, and we got 54 fantasy points from DeRozan. Who would have thought? He's $7,900 on DraftKings, Adam. To me, that's too cheap for a guy that's going to play 38 minutes in a close game. And not only that, they haven't played since the 23rd or the 22nd when they played that second of a back-to-back. DeRozan at 7,900 to me is still a very strong play in what should hopefully be a competitive game.
Yeah, I love DeRozan on DraftKings. One of my highest owned guys right now. Guard and forward eligibility obviously makes it pretty easy to get to him as well. And yeah, it's the fact that they've just been involved in so many blowouts has his price tag down. But over the last month, still a usage rate up over 30%, still leading the team in assist percentage, doing everything when he's out there. So it's really tough for me not to like him at that price tag. I really think the Spurs overall are just underpriced on DraftKings in particular.
Okay.
Yeah. 7,200 Aldridge, $5,900 Rudy Gay, and then obviously you can kind of rotate through those guards too with Brent Forbes and Derek White, both less than $4,000. Although if you're going to do that, do keep an eye on Lonnie Walker's status. He could be back, and that could just take enough minutes away from that group to where they become less appealing.
Right, absolutely. But you're right; they're all too cheap. They're all in the deep dive on Awesemo.com as well. The other side, outside of Jokic and maybe Murray, are you on anyone else here, Plumlee or whatever?
Yeah, Plumlee would be the one that I add to that.
Okay. Yeah. We don't have a lot of time, but where do you rank Jokic among Drummond and Towns and Vooch?
Behind them.
Behind all,
but not by a lot. Just
right.
Basically,
he's in the conversation. Put it that way.
Yeah. I'm just playing ownership between that group.
Last one here: Clippers and Kings. By the way, if you enjoy the content, hit us with a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us out a whole lot, and we definitely appreciate your patronage here at Awesemo.com. Clippers, Kings, 5.5 point spread. Clippers favored, 238 total, easily the highest on the slate. I'll let you close it out, but I'll tell you right now, Montrezl Harrell, 57 on DraftKings. Give me that all day long in this spot. Lou Williams, 5,400 on FanDuel. I'll take that as well. I worry about Gallinari, though. Been very good lately, but he's been super efficient, and the shot volume really hasn't been that high, so I'm probably pumping the brakes there a bit. And then with the Kings, I like De'Aaron Fox a lot as well. I'll let you round this out, and we'll head out for the night.
Yeah, Lou Williams on FanDuel, absolutely love it. I like the price tag on Harrell on DraftKings. I will point out that right now he's our highest owned guy, and it's a price point with a bunch of guys around him, so I'm fine, pivoting there in tournaments. But
he can bust,
yeah, I think it's too cheap. I like Willie Cauley-Stein. I like Fox. Bielitsa, I think, is a good play as well. And then obviously you can game stack this one as well.
Yeah, and Bogdanović too. On DraftKings, Bogdanović is 5,500. Keep that in mind too, because Williams is 5,400 on FanDuel. Bogdanović is 5,500 on DraftKings. Lou Williams is 6,600. So a huge discrepancy there. Yeah. A great game though. You can mix and match this a ton of different ways. And I would say don't be afraid to play Fox. He's been very, very good. Usage is up, assist rate through the roof, per minute production around 1.35 since the start of this month. So I wouldn't be scared away by an uptick in price point. That'll do it for us. Thanks as always for hanging out. We love you guys. Good luck tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive. Stick around. Live Before Lock, taking you up till 7 p.m. Eastern time.